Hey, IBS Society. This is going to be our first Q&A, which is really not a Q&A because I didn't really get any questions. So as we grow the community, we'll do more live Q&As, similar to what we do on Facebook or on, Instagram, but we'll probably do it in the format of my webinars. So bringing us all together and then being able to ask questions together. That's the future of these, but for now, I'm going to pre-record them just because I'm not getting a ton of questions in. So I want to make sure that there's actually good content available and we're not just sitting around with each other. But as you have questions, please ask them in the group, ask them from the community. That's what it is here for. And the reason why there is such a long trial, free trial period and pricing, it's kind of arbitrary right now because I want to make sure that the community is valuable before we start charging anybody. And I want to make sure that it's growing. So yeah. That's what it is. But some of the questions that I got post-course, so those of you that have taken the course, some of you have worked one-on-one with me, so this is going to be a little bit different, but it's still good reminders if you're continuing your progress. But one of the major things I got after the course was that people were wanting to know more of the deep, well, what if the diet isn't working? What are those details that could be interfering with progress through the diet, because the course is very educational. It's very simple, which maybe I didn't explain as well, but it is very fundamental, and I intentionally made it that way. But since I've gotten a good number of people who are wanting to know a little bit more about well, what if it's not working? What should I be doing? I am going to answer some of those today, and then I'm actually in the process of putting together a full bonus lesson that I'm going to have up before Saturday, so that you guys can go back and watch that, and I'll add it to the probably the elimination phase lesson. I'm just going to review all of those lessons, so if you have any feedback on that, if you've taken the course, let me know, because I want to make sure that it's structured well so that when you are going through the content yourself, you're getting what you need at the right time, if you're not just going through it all before you start the diet. But anyways, a few things. If the low FODMAP diet isn't working, what else could be going on? So the first part of that is portion sizes of the specific foods you're eating and of the meals themselves. Now, I want to preface this by saying if we overthink the diet and we stress out about the diet, it's going to become stressful and anxiety is going to increase, which can actually increase symptoms. So if you find that you are overwhelmed with measuring every single thing, then it may be better to take a more simplistic approach first and then look at the portion sizes if you're getting to the point where the symptoms aren't subsiding. 'Cause I have even a lot of one-on-one clients that even the very simplistic, just going by the food list and not stressing out about portions will help reduce their symptoms. And they have a lot of success in that. And there's a lot more joy in that versus if you are feeling very overwhelmed and you're more type A and you want it all controlled, you might be causing unnecessary stress. So that we'll get into some of that later, but that's something I wanted to preface. But if you are following the food list and you're I've been doing low FODMAP for a while and I just am not seeing a reduction in symptoms, I don't know when to reintroduce because I'm still having very inconsistent symptoms, or every time I eat I'm having a symptom, look at the portion sizes of those foods. My food list that I provided, some portion sizes are listed, but not all are. So if there's not a portion size listed, that's why the Monash app is really helpful, just for that specific, okay, what portion size is considered low FODMAP? And those are also very conservative portions, so don't stress about it being exactly right, but being in that range, that at least under the high FODMAP portion is good. It's a good place to start. And then the other side of that is, if you're eating extremely large meals at once, that can lead to symptoms, especially if you're dealing with more bloating and constipation. It feels like you're overloaded. But there's no specific guideline of what is too much and where should you begin. I did talk about meal planning a little bit in the course. There's a guide on that, and that's a great place to start if you're I don't really know. And then you can go off of that, but that's something that you would be working one-on-one with someone about just for your specific needs. But the one thing you could do is if you feel your meals are too big, bring them down a little bit and then just make sure that your snacks are also like small meals and not just like 100-calorie snacks, because that's not going to help you stay satisfied or meet all of your nutrition needs at the end of the day. So if you're lowering those portions, you want to make sure that you are still meeting your nutrition needs. That's important. If you're under eating, symptoms can occur, so it's important. The next part that kind of goes with that is, if you are eating the portion sizes that are recommended, and if you're choosing all low FODMAP foods and you're still having some symptoms after eating certain foods, you could look at FODMAP stacking. Now, I added this in the last phase. I wanted to put it towards the end because, again, I didn't really want people to stress out about it. I'm considering, and I still need to think over it a little bit longer and be just really wise about it, but I'm probably going to move it to the elimination phase, just so that it's there in case you're in that phase and you're like, nothing's working, and you're eating like multiple of a subgroup at once. I see this most of the time with fruit. People tend to eat a ton of fruits at once. They're all low FODMAP, but then all together, then they start stacking. But honestly, if you're keeping low portion sizes, you're probably not going to be stacking. Like, it's not that common to happen, but it does happen sometimes. So if you are still not experiencing relief, that is in lesson 5 right now. You could go revisit that now, and there's just like it's a PDF that you go through, and that's something that in the society we'll probably dig into even more if you guys are finding that you want help with that, especially in relation to customizing the diet for yourself and reincorporating foods, because that's where it's really important. Because if you know that you're very triggered by fructan, like how do we include some fructans every now and then without crossing that threshold that we know will cause symptoms for you? If you're not sensitive to a group, then don't stress out about it. Really, the more freedom you can find in your eating, the more joy you're going to find. So I don't want you to stress about it, but that is something that you could just review and look at. And that's something that I look at for my clients one-on-one. I don't always talk about it because I don't want to stress out my clients, but if they're sending me food logs, I'm kind of considering that, and it might be something that I work more into my one-on-one program just to make sure that everyone's comfortable and confident in that. Another one is, are you balancing out your meals well? So symptoms can be caused by FODMAPs, and we have a lot of success with low FODMAP, but symptoms can also be caused by other things when it comes to balanced meals. One of those being fiber. Too little or too much fiber can cause issues. So spreading fiber out throughout the day and eating good sources of fiber, which means eating plants, that is really valuable, and that's a great place to start if you're not experiencing relief from symptoms. If you feel like, I do eat a lot of plants, like am I eating too much fiber? One way you can start decreasing fiber without completely cutting out those plants would be to peel like vegetables and maybe reduce resistant starches like sweet potatoes, oats, rice, things like that. But start by peeling first and then reduce the food themselves, because we want the food in there if we can get it, and we don't want to go from having so much fiber to no fiber. You also don't want to go in the opposite where you have no fiber and you go to a ton. You want to slowly increase. So that's something that you could look at. There's a lot of resources on fiber in the course. And if it's not clear, let me know. That, again, something I have that actually planned for July in the society. We're going to do a full workshop on fiber and talk about that more so that you can take a look at that for yourself. Another part is fat. So if you're eating very high fat meals, your body may not be reacting really well, especially if you deal with any kind of fat malabsorption or with diarrhea. This can happen a lot too. So if you're eating really high fat foods, whether they're meat or plant-based, animal or plant-based, that could be causing some issues for you. So you want to really be careful with that. The tendency with low FODMAP sometimes is to take out carbohydrates and eat more of a keto-like diet that's higher in fat just to get in the calories. But what that can do is overload the digestive system and make it hard to pass stool or digest quickly enough so that you're hungry and ready for your next meal, which will lead to bloating and all of that. So look at that fat content. Make sure that you're getting good healthy fats, and if you're eating small portions, fat's important, but not overdoing it on the fat is important. And then the last part is like, are you actually eating a variety of nutrients in like whole foods, or are you eating mostly processed foods? I've had some clients that are eating all low FODMAP foods, but they're very processed. And so we will see some issues with symptoms just because they're eating more processed foods, which will contain some of those tricky ingredients. I did update the food list to include some of those like tricky ingredients because I know everyone has questions about that, but some that aren't really considered like high FODMAP that aren't even on there would be like gums, and that can be in a lot of processed foods, which if you're eating it every now and then, no big deal, but if you're eating it all the time every day, like that's going to be a big deal. So be mindful about that. Another one, kind of what we mentioned earlier, is stress, anxiety, and then fear of food, which goes in with that. So the mental health side. If you're not seeing a reduction in symptoms, like I would check your stress. And I mention this a lot in the course, and I hope that you catch that if you've gone through the content. But I put the lifestyle factors as lesson 2 before the diet very intentionally. I want you to focus on your mental health and your emotional health even before you're focused on food. So if you find that you start the diet and you're letting everything go in terms of like self-care, meditation, whatever practices you've been putting in place for your stress, revisit that. And I know I got feedback from one course member about giving better, I guess, examples or instruction on how to apply that. So I'm going to revisit that lesson as well and just make sure that the content is okay enough that you can apply it and actually grow in that. So I'll try to add something if I need to, and that's something we will be focusing on in the society. Like each month, I really want to have a focus, and so there will be some lifestyle and mental health focuses because it's somewhere we can always progress and grow. But if you're not seeing results, like that's something I always try to go back to. And with one-on-one clients, like I'm always assessing that. Because they might find that like, oh, I'm having a lot of symptoms this week. It's like, oh, well, I traveled out of town and now I'm not sleeping well. And it's like, well, of course you're having symptoms. Like all of those things can trigger symptoms more than food can. So be mindful about that. And if anything like that is going on, like it may be helpful to take a step back and revisit those practices. Or if you find that you're having a lot of anxiety and fear around foods, there is the, I think it's called nocebo effect, where like placebo means you think something's going to help you and it does help you even though it may not actually be helping you, which we see sometimes with like probiotics. Nocebo would mean that you think something is going to cause a symptom, and because that's your expectation, your body will have symptoms. And that doesn't mean it's all in your head. It doesn't mean that at all. It is still very real, but that is a factor. So if you're going into a meal or like you're afraid of adding vegetables because you think that they're going to cause symptoms for you, or like rice is going to cause a symptom for you, it might be causing symptoms simply because that's your expectation. So if you have a lot of fear of food, you can check those thoughts, maybe journal through that, kind of address that. Positive self-talk before the meal, like I encourage clients to do that all the time. Or if it's bad enough that you're like, I just feel like I can't get a hold of this, like ask for help. Go establish care with a therapist, and that can be really helpful to manage that, because that can actually cause symptoms, and that might be what is holding you back from seeing relief from the diet itself. And then another one is if the diet isn't working, it could be something more serious. And I'm going to remind you guys, because I know with the course, the way that my one-on-one program is a little different because I'm working with you, but for those of you that have done the course, whenever I did the first launch, like I released the content over 5 weeks, and I tried to be very clear that you're not supposed to finish the diet in 5 weeks, but I know a lot of people, just from feedback, had jumped the gun and just kind of moved through it a little too quickly. So if that's you, I would just revisit everything and slow yourself down, because the elimination phase is 2 to 6 weeks. So 2 weeks is very short. And even with my one-on-one clients, like the ones that are introducing after 2 weeks are the ones that have already been doing the diet and have more control over their food. So ones that are able to stay home, cook for themselves. Most of them are the ones that do not have kids. They don't have as much of a stressful job. So they have that ability to like find that control faster and really take on the diet and everything that, and do it all correctly. So they see symptoms subside a little quicker. I also see that more with people who have less severe symptoms. So if you are on like week 2 and you're like, it's not working, what's going on? You may just need to maintain that consistency, because it can take up to 6 weeks for those symptoms to subside. Like, keep checking in with yourself, keep looking at what you're doing, but don't panic or don't jump into reintroductions before you're ready, because then it's going to be confusing and you're not going to get what you want out of that. So I'm going to remind you of that. But if you do move through, let's say that you're at like week 5 or 6 and you've done everything right, you're looking at your portion sizes, you're doing everything that we just talked about, you've assessed that, especially if you've worked one-on-one with a dietitian. If you're not seeing results, that's where I would recommend revisiting the gastroenterologist to rule out things that might be causing those issues. So like celiac disease, like if you hadn't been tested for that, like that's something you could get tested for. You need to be eating gluten to do that and get an accurate result. So you would need to introduce wheat back in and then go get that test. You could also be tested for SIBO. So with SIBO, you could see a relief with low FODMAP, and I love helping clients with SIBO, but it's also important to actually treat the SIBO itself, because even though you're reducing low FODMAP, or you're reducing FODMAPs, you're still going to have issues because of that overgrowth of bacteria in the gut. So you have to get that under control to get real symptom relief. So get tested for that. Gastroparesis, like I've had clients who have experienced that, and that's very real. It's like slow motility. And so sometimes you might experience more bloating or like feel like you're more constipated because things are moving more slowly, and there are treatments for that. There are modifications you can do, like lower, like smaller portions at a time, or movement, things like that, or actual treatments like medication from the doctor. So that would be something you could get checked on. And then on the, I guess, more severe side, like IBD, irritable bowel disease, which would be ulcerative colitis or Crohn's. If you have any blood in the stool, like definitely go get checked for those. But those both cause actual inflammation in the gut. And when the gut is inflamed, then digestion will be altered, and your ability to process and digest foods will be harder. And that can account for like very inconsistent or strange symptoms that just don't seem to go away. That's something that you definitely want to go get checked out. So give yourself at least that amount of time. Make sure you're checking in. Work with a dietitian if you need to. I do offer those like 60-minute gut consultations for those of you in the course. So if you are struggling in that area, that would be a good place for something like that, so that we can look at it together. You can we can intervene and do something different, or make those modifications. And then if you're still not seeing relief, then that's a good sign to go revisit the gastroenterologist to get tested for some of these other things. And then the last thing, which that should have been last, but the last thing is assessing for other gastrointestinal triggers. So things that can trigger some of your symptoms: alcohol, caffeine, chocolate. Even though dark chocolate's okay, like chocolate can still trigger some symptoms for a lot of people, and then excessive sugar. So just being aware of those things. And alcohol is a big one that I see with clients. A lot of people are either already avoiding like excessive amounts of caffeine, or like they're drinking coffee in the morning because it helps like the process get started, which is totally fine. But alcohol is something that doesn't always get addressed as well. And it's something where some of my clients, like if we're not seeing results, like sometimes we'll take alcohol out for a little while during elimination just to make sure that that's not interfering, because alcohol can inhibit the beneficial bacteria of the gut, which we're going to talk about also in July. We're talking all about gut bacteria and fiber. So we'll get into that. But alcohol can also just lead to symptoms and pull water into the gut. Same with excessive sugar. So small amounts of sugar are fine. Like, sugar is not an enemy. It's not something to be feared. Like, desserts are great. If you want to have them, go for it. But excessive amounts of sugar, so eating sugar all day and like lots of processed sugar, that can be really difficult on the gut and the gut bacteria, which kind of goes back to like processed foods. If you're eating a lot of processed foods, you might be experiencing some of those issues. So that's really it. That was the main question that I got asked during the course, and it is something I get asked on Instagram a lot, and even from clients. We work through it, but if you were curious, or if you're kind of stuck in that phase of I feel like I'm doing everything right, but it's just not working, those are some ideas, and I am getting this presentation together. I'm going to have it up in the course tonight. I'm not sure if you guys are still getting those notifications when posts are being added, but if you are, make sure you check those out because there'll be new content that I'm adding in response to feedback that you gave me. And if you have not given me that feedback, give me some feedback so that I can make sure to add those things in before it's all launched on Saturday. And, I'm always going to be able to add stuff in later on too, because I just want to make sure that we're always getting value. And on here, we're diving deeper. So if you're like, I did the course, but like I want to dive deeper into certain topics, like let me know what those are, because I'm going to be planning those out and experimenting with different formats of communication, so that we're all getting the most out of it and learning in the way that we want to, and and building community. So there we go. If you have any more questions, let me know. I'm going to try to do at least one of these a month, maybe twice a month, depending on how we grow. And then we are going to have our first masterclass at the end of this month, and that will be a lot like a webinar format, where I will provide like a class, and then we'll have some Q&As in there as well. So be on the lookout for the invite for that, and I will see you guys soon. Have a happy Thursday.